Hi there, my name's Robert, and I'm one of the people helping Pivot 613 get started. By now you've heard a little, maybe heard a lot, about Pivot 613, love first and all that. But a lot of you are probably still really wondering, what is Pivot 613? That's a question that we've heard a lot over the past few months, and it's a question we've thought long and hard about. Pivot 613 is an idea that's been developing in the hearts and minds of people for a long time, but really started to gain some traction in the early summer of 2013. God brought together the right collection of people and ideas and opportunity, and things really started to coalesce with lots of planning and pondering and soul searching. There are a lot of people that Pivot is intended for. Maybe you grew up in a church, but you know it's not as engaging or relevant to some people today as maybe it used to be. Or maybe you've been to churches from time to time, for Christmas or a wedding or something like that, but just didn't find anything that compelled you to come back. Or maybe you've been angered or hurt by the church in the past and decided that if that's what it's all about, it's not for you. The disillusioned, the disenfranchised, the uncool, we hope Pivot appeals to all these people and more. We know that some are wondering about the name, Pivot 613. You're thinking, really? That's what you're going with? Please be serious. That's not what we think of when we think of the name of a church, and that's kind of the point. 613 is just the area code. It's not a reference to a Bible verse or anything like that. It just identifies us as a community of faith dedicated to finding ways of expressing ourselves that make sense in this area. The pivot part of the title is a metaphor for what we're trying to do. We're holding on to what's important, the non-negotiables of Jesus' mission to us, the truth of what he has taught us. But while we're anchored to that one end, we're not sticking with tradition and how we live that out, how we apply it, how we introduce it to those around us. As long as we remain fixed on Jesus, we will pivot so that we can work in those ways, the ways he wants us to. So if the name Pivot 613 doesn't sound like a church, that's good. We're trying to avoid having people make assumptions about who we are based on their previous church experience. Pivot 613 is about living in simplicity and humility as we try to be more like Jesus. We want to be accessible and creative in our message and our language. We want to be a multicultural and diverse collection of people who are passionate about seeking justice and pursuing the propositions of Christ. Really pursuing, like we actually mean it. Engaging honestly with our society and culture and finding practical ways to live out Christian community. We want to do all of this with courage, resisting the fear that prevents us from being everything that Jesus wants us to be. The fear that can stifle us and make us ineffective. The fear that can derail us from our mission. We want to be known for our grace, mercy, and love. The kind of love that shocks the world and makes them shake their heads in wonder. We want to love the way that Jesus loved. We want love to be our first and ongoing reaction to every person and every situation. So that's a quick answer to the questions of what is Pivot 613? And it's just a high-level service description, really just platitudes and feel-good statements. We don't expect that it has answered all your questions. In fact, it probably generated more questions than it answered. And we're going to dive into a lot of these ideas and really chew on them, looking at the thoughts and complexities, and we're going to have the opportunity to discuss and ask questions over the coming weeks. Come along for the ride and see what Jesus has in store. We're Pivot 613. Love first.